we hope that you join us today. Are you ready for today's session? We'll start in a while. Are you ready to start? If you're ready to start, we can begin. And I'm just going to send the link to a few people, and then we can begin. So let's go. Let's wait another 5 minutes or so before we begin. We're going to start shortly. But meanwhile, you could just go on to Slido. You could actually ask questions on Slido, because Slido is a place to interact. So you could just come on the Slido, sli.do, and we will be glad to interact with you on Slido. So just come on the Slido, and we'll start in about 2 minutes. So apologies for the technical error. We were we were trying out a different app, and the app just didn't work because it didn't allow the live stream. It was strange because we were attempting to do a live stream yesterday, but it worked. So perhaps I may ask all of you to perhaps ask all your questions on PDPA and write them onto Slido. So please help us to join us on Slido. All right, so without further ado, just let me begin. And once again, hope all of you are safely at home or in safe places. And today I'm just going to share with you about PDPA and are you ready for PDPA? So let's just go. So a quick introduction about myself. My name is Mark Barnabas, and I used to be a school teacher. Became a counselor, outdoor educator, and a curriculum writer. Progressed to manage a travel company and events company. Be focusing on outdoors, and when outdoors, there are quite a bit of risk. So I've been very used to handling risk. That's very much part of our life, because when I send groups out to climb a mountain, my gosh, when it's a call, I get really stressed. When there's no call, I also get stressed. So what I did previously was I told my staff, hey, you call me on the Singapore phone in case of an emergency. If it's not an emergency, call me with the Malaysia phone. Why Malaysia? Because back then in I used to run a resort in Malaysia. It's called Mount Ophir. How many have been to Mount Ophir, the highest mountain in southern Malaysia? But whatever case, because we are one of the most climbed mountains in Malaysia, we are actually seeing the most number of incidents. And you must know, when there are most number of incidents, there are most number of accidents too. So following that, I founded the F&B business, and here I am now, managing risk and helping companies to handle the risk with regards to personal data protection. And this is my associate, Patrick. Patrick O has been in China for more than 15 years. He's now focusing on, same like me, risk advisory for companies. And he also is developing some content on blockchain technology. And no, blockchain does not mean cryptocurrency. There is more than it is to blockchain. And one of it is to record your education, history, and other applications. So you could find out from Patrick and myself more about blockchain if you are keen to find out more. So let's just go straight into our topic on what PDPA is about and what it is not about. So, what is PDPA? So let's talk about PDPA. So my questions: what is not PDPA? That's a question. So because there are many people with misconceptions of the PDPA. So let's just hear from this slide what PDPA is not and the common misconceptions of PDPA. So one of the biggest misconception of PDPA is it doesn't affect me because I am just an individual. This is not true. It does affect you because, as an individual, because you as an individual have rights to your personal data. So certainly it does affect you because the last thing you want is to have someone stealing your personal data and to use it for the wrong purposes. Now, you really don't want that to happen, do you? Now, haven't you been receiving phone calls from strange people or even getting SMSs or WhatsApp messages from people offering loans, maybe going to certain websites? Well, that is really a part of a possibility that your data might have already been stolen and used for the wrong things. So that is why it's important that each individual actually protects your personal data. So another misconception in PDPA is when I take a business card is that personal data, and do I have to protect that name card information? And can I simply call the person and sell him some products that I have? Well, it really depends. But because it is very common for many of us to go for networking events to collect lots of name cards. In fact, I've got heaps of name cards. I mean, look, heaps of name cards. These are the question is, how did you collect the data? At what context are you collecting the data for? So some of it is personal data because the phone number is personal data. Phone numbers are extremely important because I'm sure many of you actually use your phone number for your OTPs, your bank OTP, your SingPass OTP, CorpPass. So some of these details on name cards are actually personal data. So you need to understand there are the difference between personal data and business contact information. More often than not, name cards are name cards can be just business contact information, but it is not just it. So find out from the training how to differentiate between personal data and business contact information. Now, another common misconception is this: I only have to comply if I run an online business. Now, this is a very common misconception that we hear in 2-3 years ago, because it is taught that only companies that do sales online have lots of data. So it is important that we know that this is a misconception. All companies in Singapore, or rather all organizations in Singapore, have to comply with PDPA, not just online businesses. So another misconception: if I run a company, all I need to do is to appoint a DPO. That is correct. To appoint a DPO is good. However, that is not all. There is jobs for the DPO. The DPO needs to do certain roles and take on certain responsibilities. So you need to find out what these responsibilities are. So if you run a company, you need to appoint more than a DPO. This statement is false. Now, let's talk about this one. My business only involves dealing with other business owners, which is B2B. I do not have personal data. Well, it could be true for some companies. However, if you are running a company with staff, the personal data of your staff is personal data. You certainly would employ a staff and pay the staff CPF, do the tax, and this requires you to have the NRIC of the staff. Not just a copy of the NRIC, but also the numbers itself. So you need to demonstrate that you have sufficient and reasonable protection for these personal data. One more misconception: there is one size fits all template for all businesses. This is not true as well, because every business is slightly different. And it is important that we know that the business differs even if it's in the same industry, and in PDPA compliance, when we do the DPMP or the documents required for compliance, you need to look into how the business operates from the collection to the destruction of data. So when did PDPA came about? It came about really very much in 2012 when it was first passed in the Singapore Parliament, and in 2014 it was passed as law. And it was actually in 2019, September 1st, where there was stricter enforcement in PDPA, where collection of NRIC has totally become outlawed. By now, you would know that collection of NRIC is not permitted unless they belong to the exempted group. So this is what I mentioned. So in fact, in 2016 to 2019, many guides like how to do this, how to do that, including NRICs, these were all introduced. And many a times, many guides and advisory in Singapore will become law. And today, well, NRIC is now law. There you go. In 1st September, NRIC has become law. You cannot collect your NRIC if you do not have a good reason to. So what is the purpose of PDPA then? The purpose of PDPA is to govern the collection, use, and disclosure of personal data by organizations in a manner that recognizes both the rights of individuals to protect their personal data and the need of organizations to collect, use, or disclose personal data for purpose that a reasonable person would consider appropriate in the circumstances. Now, this is legal jargon. So let me break it up for you and make it really simple. Generally, PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act in Singapore, governs how organizations collect, use, and disclose personal data. Every individual has the right to their personal data, and we can ensure that companies collect it for the right purpose and is reasonable. That's where I know you have another question. What is reasonable? Yes, reasonable is, like I like to say, 50 shades of gray. Yes, 50 shades of gray, because what is reasonable for you may not be reasonable for another person. For instance, for some, okay, let's talk about lucky draw. Remember those days where when you fill up a lucky draw coupon, they would actually ask you for your full name, NRIC, address, phone number, even your dog's name, your mom's name. Now that's a bit too much. That is not reasonable. I mean, in this situation of a lucky draw, what is probably reasonable for the purpose of a lucky draw is that all you need to know as a lucky draw person is to know that I am who I am. It's me, my name, probably the last 4 digits of my NRIC, and maybe my phone number so you can call me. So it is reasonable for the lucky draw organizer to collect your phone number or your email, the least, so that they can contact you. So that in this situation is reasonable. So really, reasonable can vary. So it's really up to the business owners to decide what is reasonable, and hopefully nothing goes wrong. So moving on. So what's so great about personal data? Personal data. Why is there so much emphasis on personal data? Remember this? Were you all around? Were you all in Singapore on the 31st of December 2019 when you saw these little lights in the sky? These are nothing more than drones. You know, drones, the things you play, or I mean kids will play, control it with a cell phone. Yes, this is an army of 500 drones that was used during the New Year's Eve to create beautiful shapes like these, and they could even create a clock. I remember the last 30 seconds of the countdown. These drones form a clock and moved like the second hand, tick, 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 until the countdown 12 midnight 2020. So these are drones. And these drones, it's not difficult for us to program these drones to be armed with a camera, to be armed with a weapon. To weaponize these drones is just putting 3 grams of explosive. And if I could get these drones to use the facial recognition, recognize maybe certain face, certain hair color, all weaponized.
Yes, they can be weaponized. It's not science fiction anymore. It can be possible. You already know cameras are very clever. Your cell phone camera could already recognize your face, your friend's face, maybe not a baby's face, but understand how to protect it. So personal data is really information that can be used to identify a single individual. So name, address, location, health information, income, cultural profile, color, these are all important information pieced together to form this number is definitely personal data because that single number is used by the Singapore government to identify every individual in Singapore, whether is it citizen, PR, or foreigner. A foreigner will have a FIN number if they or work permit number. So these numbers are really are single identifiers. But what about these bits of information? These bits of information, if put together, can identify a person. It's also personal data. Let me give you an example. Let's say my name, Mark Lee. Barnabas, my middle name, right? If I use my name, Mark Lee, is that personal data? It is not personal data because I'm sure you know there's another Mark Lee on TV. So let's use Mark Lee of Ang Mo Kio. Is that personal data? Probably not, unless there's only one Mark Lee in Ang Mo Kio. But you don't know that for sure, do you? So let's go a bit deeper. Mark Lee staying Ang Mo Kio from this school called Ang Mo Kio Secondary School. Is that personal data? Again, not quite, because there may be more than one Mark Lee in Ang Mo Kio and in Ang Mo Kio Secondary School. So you see, when I have more and more information and I can identify a single individual, these can be personal data. So let's go straight into it. Mark Lee, staying Ang Mo Kio. Ang Mo Kio Secondary School, class of 1990. And he used to play badminton. With this information put together, you could probably trace back the picture of Mark Lee in the school annual book and probably find out what class he was in, and probably who his friends are. That is personal data. So in the PDPC, which is our personal data, the PDPC, Personal Data Protection Commission. I'm so sorry about that. They refer to personal data of individual who can be identified from that data, or data from other information that the organization is likely to have access to. And guess what? This is something new that I discovered about a couple months back. Even the data of the deceased are subject to protection in PDPA, and they have to be kept and safeguarded for 10 years. So there is a lot of information that we have that can be personal data. And trust me, as a previous travel agent, I am so afraid because I have so much personal data: name, NRIC, passport, date of birth, gender, and all these information pieced together. I have so much about a person, and I need to protect them. So these are the guidelines taken from the PDPC on NRIC that generally tells you that you cannot collect the NRIC. And if you collect the NRIC, you have to make reasonable arrangements to protect the personal data in your possession. And you are expected to provide a greater level of security to protect NRIC numbers, or copies of NRIC in digital or hard copy. Yes, digital or hard copy. Have you done any of that? How many of you are employers? Maybe you have even part-time workers. Think about it. So this is one of the components of PDPA NRIC guidelines. The second component of PDPA is do not call, something that most of us are already familiar with because this was the very first guideline that was actually introduced in PDPA in 2014. And you will know that if you put yourself on this thing called the DNC registry, you should not be receiving phone calls or marketing messages from unsolicited parties. Meaning, if you have not given your clear or individuals from calling you or sending you a message, they have actually breached PDPA and you can report them. However, today, you know, some of these marketing companies actually send you messages using foreign numbers. And sometimes these numbers that are sent to you are even created numbers from the IP protocols. So there's a new rule in Singapore that mentions if you see a number that has +65 in front, that is a fake IP number, which means this. If you see +65 and this 8 numbers, this is not a real phone number, because a real phone number will just appear like this. A real phone number would appear without any prefix. It would just, if you see a +65 in front, that number could be created from a machine, a robot, yes, or what we call an IP number. Those of you who are in who knows PBX pretty well, you will understand what I'm talking about. It is an IP phone number, but doesn't mean that these numbers are spam numbers, because sometimes when you go to polyclinics, the polyclinics actually use the IP phones to send a message to you that says, hey, this queue number is ready to be called, so come to the counter right now. So it's just to notify the user like us that the number might come from a foreign number or an IP. So it's really up to us to discern. So the third component of PDPA is the 9 obligations. So I repeat, the first part of the PDPA is NRIC. Second is really the DNC, and the third component of PDPA is 9 obligations. And the 9 obligations are consent, notification, purpose, accuracy, protection, retention, access and correction, transfer, and accountability. It is not possible for me to cover all 9 obligations in this little session, but I really hope that you can sign up for the fundamentals of PDPA. It is covered in the fundamentals of PDPA, where you can then learn about the 9 obligations and how to apply them in your organization, because these are part of compliance. But what I'll do right now is to share why that PDPA is important, because if we do not comply with PDPA, we could be subject to the commissioner's decisions if there's a breach. So when there's a breach, yes, there are some penalties. And in Singapore, the penalties are up to 1 million Singapore dollars. But really, the PDPA is not an act that really wants to penalize organizations, but really it's to help organizations build trust among their stakeholders and to develop a system to take care of personal data, because you already understand by now that protection of personal data is extremely important. Talk about some enforcement cases that we have noticed that are what I call landmark cases, because some of these cases are really, really important and interesting. So while there are many, many cases in the PDPC, you can always go to PDPC and look for some of these cases. There are several cases there, ranging from 2017 all the way to the most recent ones in 2020. So let's look at a few cases that I think are pretty important. So there are cases like this, whereby a LAN cafe, a local area network gaming cafe, was fined 7,000 for putting up for revealing or 11 individuals NRIC. There's another one, a landmark one that happened last year on 4th of November. Ninja Van, or Ninja Logistics that runs Ninja Van, was fined 90,000 Singapore dollars for failing to put in place reasonable security arrangements to protect customers' data. So that is one of the possible reasons why some of us may be receiving SMS, because we do not know if our data is already in here and perhaps stolen by perpetrator and used for malicious purposes. So other landmark cases are Horizon Ferries, fined 54,000 for failure to appoint a data protection officer and the failure to develop and implement data protection policies and practices. And also Singtel for failing to put in reasonable security arrangements to protect, again, the personal data of their users. So many cases in, and I'm particularly interested in travel and real estate. But let's talk about this particular case here that is really interesting and it might shock some of you. How many of you know this company called Royal Caribbean Cruise? some of you might have been on it. In fact, cruises have been on the limelight because of the recent COVID-19. For many ports didn't allow many cruise ships. But let's get back to the case. Royal Caribbean Cruise, they breached the protection obligation. And let's study this case. The three stakeholders here: Royal Caribbean Cruise, the IT vendor that they engage, and AWS. AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. So Royal Caribbean engaged an IT vendor to generate and store electronic receipts in the system. And the vendor only does the receipts portion. And this vendor stored the receipts of customers onto the AWS servers, a third-party server. Now, what happened was this: the IT company then informs Royal Caribbean Cruise that they are subject to a cyber attack. Let's talk about cyber attacks here. There is really no way you can prevent a cyber attack. You can only harden your defenses because a cyber attack is just too difficult to prevent. I mean, cyber attackers attack. Hey! I have already not hacked into, let's say, Amazon or Singtel. It's like a trophy. Another reason why the hacker would hack in the company is because they were paid to do so, malicious reasons. And another one is because they do it. Yeah, so one reason they do it for pure fun. Second, they do it for a trophy. They want to be recognized. And thirdly, they do it for money. They could be doing it for themselves or being paid to do it. So in this situation, Royal Caribbean Cruise was subject to a cyber attack and resulted in 6,000 personal data. Now, they got a cyber attack, and what the attacker did was the attacker locked their data and did not allow access to the IT vendor. And what was really funny was that they demanded for a ransom of 0.08 Bitcoin. I mean, those of you who know how much 0.08 Bitcoin is, it's not a lot of money. But again, the Royal Caribbean couldn't just simply pay the fine. I mean, not the fine. They couldn't just pay the ransom because it was, if you pay the ransom, they could be aiding a terrorist act because you do not know where these funds are going to. So if you get a cyber, you cannot just pay off the ransom because you need to report it to the police right away. So fortunately for Royal Caribbean Cruise, they had a backup, so they forfeited. They allowed the hacker to keep whatever they want, but they reverted back to their original backup, but they were still fined 16,000. However, they were already PDPC was already lenient because RCC actually cooperated well with the investigation, and RCC was able to take remedial actions to ensure that the data of the customers were kept safe. So another one that hit a heartstring for me: Society of Tourist Guides. Society of Tourist Guides, it's a non-profit organization. It's a society that the tour guides would put themselves in. They actually work with the STB. And so what happened in this case was the society hired again an IT vendor, and of course the members of the society data were breached. So I mentioned STG, Society of Tour Guides, it's a non-profit organization. They engage a third-party IT vendor from Vietnam to create a website here. I'm not being racist here. I'm not being issue. It is the facts of the case because many of us do outsource work outside of Singapore. So they outsourced to an IT vendor that created the website, and in their contract, they only provided IT assistance. They are not what they call a data intermediary. So what happened in this case was the personal data of members, including NRIC and photos, was stored in a publicly accessible folder, which I'm guessing, I could be wrong here, I'm guessing it's a FTP server that a hacker could have raided in their worming around or snooping around the website. So in this case, the judge said that the IT company was not an intermediary, they were just a contractor, and therefore STG, the society, was responsible for the protection. And subsequently, the society was fined 20,000 and they had to comply with the protection immediately. So if you are outsourcing your web services to a third party, you really have to be really careful and look at the terms of your contract and determine whether the vendor is a data intermediary or just a simple contractor. So talk to our consultants, myself or Patrick, and you could find out more about this. So these are some of the landmark finds that happened last year, and this snapshot was taken before the Ninja van case, because the Ninja van would have been somewhere here, 90,000. So we really need to be wary that the government is very serious about data protection. They are serious, so we ought to be serious too. But I talk about data protection, but what about cybersecurity? As you can see from the previous two cases, they were a result of cyber attacks. So you can't really protect your personal data if you do have cybersecurity. True or false? I think very true for many organizations, because how many of us still use pen and paper to store our data? I'm sure we still have we use Excel or some spreadsheet or some CRM, or maybe a enterprise resource system to store our data. Very few companies with the government's drive to have SMEs to go digital would still be on pen and paper. But I know of one type of organization that is using pen and paper. Yes, there is one type, and I just met them not too long ago. It is the general practitioner at the below the block of some of your housing estates, because they still use the index cards to record patients' information. So they are probably the only ones who do not need cybersecurity. But otherwise, I think most of us need some cybersecurity. And it's very disheartening to know that many Singaporeans believe that they are not cybercrime at target. Well, we have to be vigilant, because these cyber attacks are real, and I am also a subject of a cyber attack. In fact, I was spearphished, in fact, just about a month ago, when I had someone calling me from Microsoft, telling me that I had many foreign IPs logged onto my computer and I should do something. So be very careful of these cyber attacks, and sometimes they are passive, sometimes they're active, using social engineering. So you can find out more in our cybersecurity talks. So there you go. This is a result of social engineering, where scammers impersonate technical support staff, even the police. Very daring. And some of you who are already using Zoom, take note of this. There are some real cyber risks here, which is why I apologize that we're using YouTube today, because we actually plan to use another software, because we wanted to test out another software and not be dependent on one. And that's really part of risk management, not to depend on only a single software, but to have a variety. So just name a few software that you can use for web conferencing. There is Zoom, there is Cisco WebEx, there is Google Meet Hangouts, there is a Lark, and several others. The more conventional ones are Facebook and WhatsApp as well. These all are Skype as well. All these can be used for a online meetings. But whatever the case, I would like to remind everybody that the most important thing is to protect whatever you share online, and not carelessly share pictures of these online, or send out lists of information without protecting them or encrypting them. So that's part of cybersecurity. Protect yourself at your level. So cybersecurity is something not new in Singapore. In fact, it is the sixth pillar of our total defense, if you're not familiar. And we also have a ICE 71 at Ayer Rajah that has several cybersecurity startups. So the nation is taking a very strong stance on cybersecurity. And I'm showing this graph because I want everyone to know that cybersecurity has come up to what we call Gen 5, or not. This graph is from this company called Checkpoint, one of the largest cybersecurity company in the world. They shared with me that in the 1990s, we only knew about virus scans. But today, we are talking about mega hacks all over the world into big systems. And many of us are probably just stuck here we use virus scan to protect our computer. We use firewalls to protect our networks. But how many of us have protection for the apps on our phone? How many of you even have antivirus in your phone? Double check that, because your phone is something that you use to go online probably most of the time nowadays. So are you protecting your phone? I've got mine. Have you got yours? Pointing to some experts that we know. So like I said, we have antivirus, network, cloud, data security, application, IoT meaning Internet of Things. It helps to track your distance and heart rate. Yeah, those are all IoT devices. So there is, again, important that we protect our data, because if we do not protect our data, then we are actually putting our reputation at risk, especially if the company has a long history, and you wouldn't want that to happen, wouldn't you? And more importantly, for vendors who are serving the government on GBIS, might want to start looking at having themselves complying with PDPA, because third-party vendors to be subject to PDPA. And even before this COVID-19 thing, I've got friends who are running travel agencies, my associates before, they're asking me how to comply, because some of the MOE schools are already asking for compliance. So how do you demonstrate compliance? So you demonstrate compliance by having a set of documents that I will share later. But more importantly, again, the purpose of PDPA is really to build trust among our customers and stakeholders. And of course, we built PDPA to not fall into this category whereby we get a breach, but more importantly, to build trust. Because if we want to build a long-term, sustainable, reputable business beyond COVID-19, we must develop trust, not only with our own staff, but our customers as well. So these are our stakeholders. So come to the crux. How do I know if I comply with PDPA? Just let me ask you a few questions. Of course, we do run assessments for companies to help them to check on their level of compliance and the maturity in risk management. So this is a quick questionnaire for you. First question, do you have a DPO? If you still do not know what a DPO is, then you're really not compliant law. Okay, a DPO stands for Data Protection Officer. And in the very first slide, I already mentioned, a company must have a DPO, and the DPO needs to perform certain roles and responsibilities. I'm sorry. So please remember, how do you find out the role and responsibility of DPO? Come for course. Do you have a work process if you collect NRIC? Which means if you have staff, part-timers or full-timers, employed staff, you will certainly have a copy of the NRIC in your P files perhaps, or the least you have is the Excel spreadsheet with the NRIC, because you probably need to pay CPF every month. So have you got a workflow if you collect NRIC, and if you have and for staff who handle personal data, from the person that collects the questionnaire for your, maybe your, if you run the spa perhaps, if you collect the personal data, do they know how to collect personal data? Do they know how to answer questions from the staff? Do they know how to store the personal data? Do they know how to keep it safe? Or even your IT, does your IT team know how to handle personal data? You do not want your personal data to be, again, like the Society of Travel guides, to be left on a publicly accessible folder. So fourth question, are you able to fulfill all the 9 obligations of PDPA? The 9 obligations being consent, notification, protection, assess and correction, and so on and so forth, all the way to accountability. If you are not able to, if you do not know the 9 obligations, of course you can't fulfill them or comply with them. So please find out what the 9 obligations are so that you can comply with them. But I can tell you that the most important is protection. Do you have a DPMP? DPMP stands for, hang on, do you know what DPMP stands for? If you do not know what a DPMP is, then you probably don't have one. A DPMP stands for Data Protection Management Program. A DPMP is a set of documents, not one document. It's a set of documents that demonstrates the roadmap as to how an organization handles personal data and also how it handles a breach. So there are many more questions to ask, because there's a lot of things to look at when it comes to complying to PDPA, because it doesn't only involve the marketing staff. Remember, the purpose of PDPA is to govern how organizations collect, use, and disclose. So it can involve quite a bit of people in the organization and quite a few processes. So like I said before earlier on, all organizations need to comply with PDPA, and this is a list of businesses and organizations that I feel need it more urgently because of the fact that they handle quite a bit of personal data, and it is travel agency. I mean, I was one. I understand the risk, and there is so much personal data there, and this is probably a very good time for travel agencies to build on their competencies, their core competencies, while they held up all the way to post COVID-19. So the other agencies that handle a lot of personal data are the real estate and the insurance agencies. And there's already a case in PDPC where the insurance agent was charged for DNC, for not checking that the numbers that he bought was from DNC. So insurance agencies, the agents themselves are their own DPO, so they are really at risk. The third group of people that are really at risk are private schools, tuition and enrichment centers, because they not only carry personal data of the clients, the parents of children, but they also have the personal data of children. And although we do not have a special law for personal handling personal data of children, but there is a case whereby the punishment or the enforcement was a bit stricter because the personal data of children were breached. The fourth group of organizations that really need to protect personal data are your general practitioners and the dentists. I'm referring not to the big groups, but really the individual clinics in the housing estates, because some of them still use pen and paper, yeah. So this is important. And the fifth one, non-profit organizations that include charities and religious organizations, church, temple, mosques, and even societies. These are also organizations that need to protect personal data. And why do we say they are at risk? Because we know these organizations want to do good. However, in the course of doing good, sometimes the emphasis to protect personal data may not be there and is overlooked. So it is important that anybody or everybody in the organization that handles personal data knows what to do, and that the organization has a good framework to handle personal data. So in summary, the need for privacy protection is growing trend because we are now progressing from the information age to the age of 5G and AI. And like I mentioned when we started about the drones that can be weaponized and using personal data to target certain people, this is the time it is really possible. It's really a time that companies and organizations need to protect the personal data of individuals. And this is the time we need to recognize that. And PDPA is important. Like I said, some organizations need it more urgently than others because of their amount of personal data they hold. And we need to realize that while there's a trade-off between the security and protection of personal data versus convenience, we need to be, I would say, we need to be wise. Think wisely on how we handle the personal data, because with a lot of protection, with a lot of layers, there can be a lot of inconvenience. So we need to weigh and put in between. So that's the reason why I say the word reasonable 50 shades, yeah. Finally, the purpose of PDPA is really to build trust among stakeholders. So we need to retain our existing customers and attract new customers, because I am sure they will be glad to know that their personal data, if given to you as an organization, is going to be appreciated. So my last my statement here will be: do something today. Do to protect your personal data. If you do not know enough about personal data protection and the act involved, do send someone for training, or you be trained yourself or perhaps you can call in a consultant like us, Patrick and myself. We're glad to work with you to assess the personal data protection compliance of your company or organization. So this is the framework we have developed for personal data. Today you are here, you are slightly aware. Today you would have known that personal data is important, you know why it's important, and you know the components of PDPA. You definitely learned something today. So I recommend some of you who are running an organization or involved in organizations or even handle personal data to start your learning journey in data protection. You can go for the fundamentals of PDPA. Talk to your friend who has invited you, because they may have access to the course which I and Patrick also run with Everest Innovation. And there in the course, you will discover in detail the 9 obligations and some of the steps to comply. So after you've done that, you can go forward to the practitioner DPO journey. This is a course where it's only offered by SMU and Singapore Poly. This is an advanced course to help DPOs to comply with PDPA. But if you want to really start complying straight away, you can come for our guided DPMP course, where we help companies get started on PDPA compliance, and of course to assess the level of risk and protect this. So alternatively, you could also have us to build your DPMP and let us transfer it to your company so that your staff can run it, because we probably can't be DPO for every company. But we really recommend that you have us do an audit for you, and we'll be glad to come in to help to give you a benchmark on where you stand. So more importantly, this is a course that I believe everybody needs to know. Everyone should just learn how to comply PDPA and learn about cybersecurity. And cybersecurity starts from the most simple thing, the cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone or laptop. So basic knowledge on cybersecurity we'll cover in step 10. So talk to Patrick or myself. You can go to our website, complypdpa.com, and you can search for us there. Otherwise, you can also look for us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group called Protect Your Data Singapore. Protect Your Data Singapore. That's a Facebook group that we have started. It's really a Facebook group that we use to curate some of our articles and use it for our reference. But you can always join the group and post your questions there as well. So we have a QR code. You can scan this QR code if you want to try out a list of questions, more questions on compliance, to see how compliant your organization really is, and you get a score from us, and perhaps also a call so that we can follow up with you. So this is the course, Fundamental of PDPA. It will cover the introduction of PDPA, the DNC, the roles of DPO, yes, the roles of DPO, the data inventory map, and handling complaints relating to data protection. So this is the course that is Skills Future funded. You can speak to your friends who have introduced you to this call. So finally, I'd like to thank everyone for your time. Feel free to contact myself or Patrick on LinkedIn or LinkedIn, or email us so that we can talk to you and give you more information about Personal Data Protection Act. So with that, I hope you have learned something. It's been a very short day. Again, I apologize. I apologize for the technical error. We will certainly do better next week, and hope to see you again soon, and perhaps in class where we can share with you more about personal data protection. So my name is Mark Barnabas Lee, signing off. You can search for me on LinkedIn, Mark Barnabas, or even on Facebook, and I'll be glad to be in contact with you. So for regards to the course, please look for the friend that has introduced you. So with that, thank you very much and good day. Goodbye.